The 2JZ GE and GTE. I'm going to show you something completely different today. The main reasons why one of these engines is just not up to the task and costs too much money to build. So let's get straight into it. I would like to acknowledge that all of this information is not my own. This is a collaboration of geniuses that have worked on 2JZs over the years, and they've built on each other's ideas and created an amazing material for us to use and build on. I'm proud to log this video diary with respect to them and a little bit of my own information. I hope you enjoy this. The Toyota JZ family of engines consists of the 1JZ GE, which is a 2.5 litre naturally aspirated engine, and the 1JZ GTE, which is a twin turbo 2.5 litre. Then there is the 2JZ GE, which is a 3 litre naturally aspirated engine, and then the 2JZ GTE, which is of course the twin turbo 3 litre inline 6. The 1JZ GTE came out in the top of the line Mark III Supra and also in JDM Toyota Soras and Chasers, etc. We're talking about the 2JZ today, but the reason that I've mentioned the 1JZ GTE is it plays a major part in this story a little bit later on. Okay, let's get the boring stats out of the way because it's not really what we're here to talk about. The 2JZ GE is a naturally aspirated inline 6-cylinder 24 valve 2997 or 3 litre twin cam cast iron block aluminium head Toyota engine. It made 225 horsepower and roughly 220 pounds-feet of torque. It's a square bore engine and it came out in 1990-91. In 1997 they brought out a VVTi variable valve timing 2JZ GE. This had a lot of differences that wasn't good for making boost. So really skinny little rods that would bust 350 to 400 horsepower and bang! So you don't want to go near that one, but it did have variable valve timing, which meant that it had also a cam angle sensor in the head, whereas the non-VVTi GE engine has the distributor. And it was in the Toyota Arista, Crown, Altezza, Chaser, and the two big guns, of course, were the SC300 and the Mark IV Toyota Supra. The 2JZ GTE is exactly the same stats, 2997cc, it came out in 1991, and it got a VVTi version in 1997. It's twin cams and 24 valves, but there's a couple of differences between the Japanese domestic market and the European and American market. So first of all, there was a gentleman's agreement to do with the JDM model, which limited the power to just 276 horsepower or 206 kilowatts across the entire range of Japanese cars at that time. That was done through just 440cc injectors, and it had larger but weaker turbos. They were ceramic CT20A turbos. The American and European model engine came out with smaller turbos, but they had steel wheels in them, the CT12As. It also had 550cc injectors, and it was controlled by a MAF or a mass airflow meter instead of a MAP sensor, which was on the JDM. The GTE only came out in two cars, the Toyota Arista and of course the Mark IV Supra. That's it. Now let's look at the differences between the GE and the GTE. First of all, we'll have a look at the long block and the internals. The GTE has oil squirters in the bores that cool down the pistons, and that's run by a larger oil pump on the GTE that's run by the crank, and it's also got a hole there for the crank position sensor. Big note there. Has the same block, it has the same rods as the GE, but the pistons are slightly different. They're the same type of material, so they're the same strength, but it lowers the compression ratio of the GTE engine down to 8.5 to 1, whereas the GE engine is at 10 to 1. And then the variable valve timing version of 1997 is 10.5 to 1. The head gaskets are completely different. The GE has a very thin organic head gasket that will blow under boost. The GTE has a very good multi-layered steel head gasket that's 1.3 millimeters thick. Unfortunately, the heads on these engines are completely different. It would have been amazing if they used the same head, but one's naturally aspirated, one's turbo, and they suit their own purpose. The GE head has different intake ports and different exhaust ports. The intakes are actually a little wee bit smaller than the GTEs, but the exhaust ports are larger on the naturally aspirated GE engine. Another major difference is that the intake and exhaust manifolds are not interchangeable between the GE and the GTE. Big problem. So I'm going to go over the positives of the 2JZ GE. Now the absolute biggest positive of this engine, hands down, is it has the exact same block as the GTE. Smackdown, baby. This is the bit that counts. It's got the block. Cast iron, Siamese bores, bulletproof thing. One of the best blocks ever made in history, basically. The only difference it has in the block itself, discarding all the other stuff that bolts onto the block, is basically there's one little hole that you have to drill in order to get a turbo drain into it. The hole is already there. All you do is put a drill into it and drill through. Bob's your uncle, Fanny's your aunt, you've got a turbo drain hole. You do then have to drill the two other little bolt holes at each side and put in a little tap, run that around, and you've got yourself an oil drain. Done. This is another positive for the GE that you might not understand at the moment, but trust me, it's a big one. The ECU connector plug is the same on the GE as it is on the GTE. I'll tell you why later. The first one I'm going to mention is the rocker cover is made of magnesium. This is a big negative because it's not aluminium. You can't weld AN bungs to it. You also can't really drill it and tap it because the material's too thin. So in order to put a catch can onto it, it's really quite hard. Here's a secret trick though. The GTE rocker covers actually bolt onto the GE head. So undoubtedly the biggest negative for me for the GE is that it doesn't have any sensors. It's got a distributor. It's got no crank position sensor and no cam position sensors. The VVTi does have both of those, got the crank sensor and one cam position sensor, but it has weak little rods, so you can't turbo it anyway. You'd have to take the block from the GE, non-VVTi, and the head from the VVTi, which is two engines, and put the head on top of the block, and then you've got something that can take boost and be tuned properly. In summary, the GE engine loses out in every single way to the GTE. This is not a competition, it's a slaughter. The GE brought a knife to a gunfight. But there's a silver lining here. The GE has the Incredible Hulk's legs and body, it's just missing his head. So how do we give the Incredible Hulk his head back? I think the information that all of us are looking for here is how well can we make a GE engine into a GTE, and what is the budget? Is it worth it or is it not? So folks, this is my opinion only. It's certainly not the Bible. This is for SCs and Supras only. I truly believe that to purchase a GTE is by far the most cost-effective way and the easiest to do this. If you can find one. Apart from that, let's get into the NA turbo exciting stuff. This is a very brief rundown of 3 budget options to turbo the GE engine. If I get 500 subscribers from this video, I will do a full video on every single way to turbo the NA, and I will run through it fully with the engine in my garage. This is probably the cheapest method without going GTE. We've all heard of the 1.5JZ. So yes, we're going to use the factory GE block non-VVTi, so it's got those really firm rods, but we're going to use a 1JZ head. Drop that on the top with some ARP head studs and a multi-layered steel head gasket, and then use factory ECU from the 2JZ GTE with the adapter from Tweaked. Option 2 is to use the 2JZ non-VVTi block and head multi-layered steel head gasket from the GTE and also ARP head studs. Again, use the oil pump from the GTE, and the tricky part of this one is to weld 2 cam position sensor bungs into the GE head. This is very difficult to do, but if you can pull this off, then you can run the factory GTE ECU. You must use the factory GTE intake cam to do this. Again, use the Yaris coil-on plug conversion wire it straight into the ECU. Use 440 high impedance top flow injectors. You can't use the side flow off the standard GTE. Purchase a forward-facing intake manifold and get some sort of a single turbo kit. No Mark IV Supras came out with a VVTi GE engine, so you're probably better off to swap the 1JZ GTE head on instead of this one, but this is an option for other people. Again, use the GTE oil pump and crank sensor. You can use the coils from the VVTi, but better to swap over coil and plug from the Yaris again. Swap out injectors, horsepower equals size. Swap to a forward-facing intake manifold and get a big single turbo kit. You must run a standalone ECU with this option. This is a much more pricey option, but it will have very good results with the aftermarket ECU and be more reliable. This is also probably going to be a more popular option for the United States, as you don't have to lengthen the standard loom. Anyway folks, I hope you enjoyed this video. This one took me a little while to make. Please subscribe to my channel, I really need the help. This is Clayton Carlisle, Supra V World. See you in the next one.